Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I think you're going to like this video. And I appreciate when subscribers request a video because I've mentioned it several times. I kind of get stuck on ideas. I only have so many ideas in my head about, what to do a video on. I mean, I have almost 300. I think I have like 290 videos. So I've put a lot out there, and sometimes it's hard not to repeat myself. But today's request comes from a subscriber, Sigalius Miracantur, and I'm sure I've butchered the proper pronunciation or the intended pronunciation of that name, so I do apologize. And he or she, I'm not sure of the gender of the individual, commented, is the person who helped clarify that the numbering on the Roscius deck was an archaic version and it was a proper version, So I would encourage you always to read the comments in many of my videos, because a lot of times folks will come who know about something that I've said, does anybody know this? And they'll fill in the gaps. So, you can learn as much from reading my comments from some valuable individuals who I'm blessed to have follow my account, as much as what, I put out there. Now, Sigalius asked that I do a video on the Budapest, and not just a reveal video, but a demonstration reading using the Budapest, because after all, for any of you who might be familiar with the Budapest, it could be a challenge. There's a different numbering sequence for one. It's if not the first, it's one of the very earliest mass-produced tarot decks that have survived. It doesn't mean that it is the earliest one. It's just one of the ones that have survived. This and the Rosenberg? Let me check. I'm so sorry. The Rosenwald. I should have known. I knew it. My brain doesn't always remember things perfectly. So the Rosenwald. I don't know which one of these is earlier than the other, but they're both two early examples of the earliest mass-produced decks that we are aware of. Now, I think in the past I've done a comparison video between the Rosenwald and the Budapest. And today I'm going to do two things. I'm going to run through the deck, and I've probably done that in the past, but with like 290 videos out there that I've done, it may be kind of hard to find. So I'm just going to show the deck again, and then we'll do a demonstration reading or two at the end of it. And I haven't decided on what the demonstration questions will be, but I'll come up with something before the video ends. Before I get started, I really appreciate if you could hit the subscribe button and hit the notification button if you haven't already done that, and to share my videos when it's applicable, and subscribe and like. If you appreciate my feed, then I would appreciate that you could do that for me, because it will help me be able to continue to do these kinds of videos without having to go the route of Patreon and membership. I'm getting close. I'm getting there, because these decks are expensive and I'm in a tight squeeze lately, so I need the traffic, and I'd like to keep my channel free. So if you could do that for me and share me, that would be great. Okay, so let me flip the camera and take a look at this deck and what it offers us. So the only copy of the Budapest that I think I own is Tarot Sheet Revival's version. I'm not sure of which publication, if it's the first or the second, but it is the one that was, I believe, according to this wrap, was 2019. So I have whichever one was printed in 2019. Now, I've seen wrappers of the Budapest with red, but mine is yellow. My outer sheet wrapping is yellow. The side identifies it as the house of Sullivan Hisman's, Cartier and engraver, where he's from, and then the company, Tarot Sheet Revival. Tarot Sheet Revival. HS, Hisman Sullivan or Sullivan Hisman's, I don't know. I always say Sullivan Hisman's, but I could be wrong. And then the cover, this beautiful sun. And it's initialed. And it looks like I have card or deck number 35. And the run, I believe, is 450. Now it comes with another wrap to keep the cards intact. Now my little thing did come unglued, but I'm not fretting over it because it just makes it easier to get the cards out. Now, in addition to the deck, we have a few other cards, which I'm going to read directly from this card, not to insult your intelligence, but just because it's just one card, and there's one in English and one in French, but it's full of good information, so let me read it. Okay. The geographical origin accepted for this game is Italy, Venetia, or Ferrara, and its date is somewhere between the end of the 1400s and the beginning of the 1500s. So it'd be the 14th century, the end of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th century. So we're talking about the end of the 1400s and the beginning of the 1500s. This tarot deck is a reconstruction of one of the oldest printed tarots. The original documents are uncut sheets, partially incomplete, situated in different museums: the Metropolitan Museum, the Budapest Museum of Fine Arts, and private collections. Fortunately, these sheets complement one another, and it is possible to recompose all the 22 trumps and the major part of the 78 card deck. The restoration work took the direction of the closest redrawing of the original line drawing. As some of the sheets were stencil colored, the final rendering respects, as far as possible, the aspect and forms observable on the source documents. The attention to the finest details during all the elaboration process made this tarot extremely close to its original model. The envelope wrapping your tarot is an original creation and a hand-painted liner cut inspired by this fascinating and particular style. For this limited edition, each deck is numbered and signed from 1 to 450 on the envelope and on an additional card. If you wish to know more about your new favorite tarot deck, visit the website www.tarotsheetrevival.com. And then we have 35 out of 450. Then we have a few cards, 2 cards, explaining the order, the sequence, and the marks that were on the cards to give us the trump order or the triumph cards. Right? There are different. I mentioned in the description that it's believed that it came from Venice or the Ferrara region, and the reason for that is because of the ordering. This would have been a typical ordering of the triumph cards. And so it's handy to have. So one of the reasons why interpreting or doing a reading with this deck might be a challenge for us is because we don't have the typical sequencing that we're accustomed to. And because it's a historic deck, thankfully, Sullivan Hisman's did not reorder it for modern palette. He remains true, right? So we have... for example, from the very beginning, the Empress is 2, the female Pope is 3, the Emperor is 4, And the Pope is 5. Then we have 6 is Temperance. We do have 7 for Triumph, but 8 is Love. 9 is Fortitude. 10 is the Wheel. 11 is, I think that's the Hermit. I think that's a word that suggests whatever they use for the word for hermit. 12, Lo Impiccato, maybe the Hanged One. The Death, Devil. Okay, for 15, well, I think we're just going to have to look at the cards and we'll know better because I can't translate what they are. But that card is very helpful. And then this is just a title card. So I don't know if whatever version was created in, okay, here it says second limited edition, 450. So this must be the second edition from 2019. So I did not get in on the first edition. And I do remember when it first came out, and I wasn't in a position to be able to afford it, so that's why I didn't go for it. Okay, so here we have the Fool. Now notice him. He's got lots of bells hanging and dangling. There's only 2 colors employed in this deck. In most of these cards, I think there might be some blue somewhere along the lines, but I think for the most part, it's predominantly yellow and red. Now, he's not a young person. You know, a lot of times in tarot, when we see a bearded individual, it suggests somebody who's older, right? After a certain age, maybe they grew beards. And here, the Bagato is an individual who is surrounded by others. It's called El Bagatella. But he does look like a street vendor, doesn't he? He's doing some kind of trick on a table with his dice. Those look like dice. I'm not exactly sure what all the other objects are, but the cup and ball trick maybe. An unusual numbering for Temperance. So far, I think only the Fool, the Bagatella, and the Chariot are standard numbering. And I think, I'm not sure where I read this information. It might have been Cheryl Smith's Tarot Heritage page. And if you'd like more information than what I just read, check out her website. I think if you type in Tarot Heritage Budapest Tarot, it'll pop up. I think she elaborates, and it may also be on Sullivan Hissman's own website, that some of the cards, the original cards that exist, were used for bookmaking. You know, they would print a sheet, and if there were any, and in each sheet they printed maybe had 20 cards. And if there was a defect, they would just abandon the whole sheet. And they would recycle the paper, and they would use the recycled paper for bookbinding. So as the years went on and historians were dismantling certain historic books to repair them, they would come across the filler paper used for the bookbinding were some tarot cards. Now, I think in both of these, for example, the Chariot and the Lover card, the bottoms I think were cut, you know, because when they cut it to use for the book, they cut it in a random location. So I think there are others, but I think these two are cards that Sullivan Hismans had to kind of create the bottom, you know, based on what he thought. Now, I've seen images of other Budapest recreators who, so it must be from this point down that had to be recreated, who have a standing gentleman and a standing woman with the arrow piercing her heart. And in this one, Sullivan Hismans has her, that she captured the spear rather than it piercing her, and that she's seated and he's on one knee. So we have fortitude. So for the most part, I think so far, despite the numbering, we're able to identify what the cards are. Okay, we have, and I think for 11, let me see what I said. Yeah, El Gobo was the Hermit. Lo Impacciato, it is, okay, so that whatever that word means, it references the Hanged One. We know death is 13. And 14 is the Devil. Now we see a face in the area of the nether regions. And he's got wings, but he doesn't have minions. He's got animal feet. And 15 is the Tower. The Star. The Sun. Oh, excuse me, this isn't the Sun. This would be the Moon. My apologies. This is the Moon. The Moon for sure. Yeah, that's the Moon. And, you know, it's got a little bit of a, you know, you wonder where, you know, TDM 1 and 2 came from. It's not a full facing moon. It's kind of got a side glance, but it is the way the moon was done in early Italy in this deck. And we have the Sun. This is a full-on sun. What a glorious sun. Oh my goodness. The Judgment. And we see people emerging, it looks like. We have a touch of blue in these last two cards. We have Justice is the penultimate rather than Judgment, and the World card is the last card in the sequence. Ace Swords, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we have the Page, Knight, Queen, King. Now, I'm not positive, but I remember reading, and I don't know the source, but I think if any of the suits had to be recreated, it was the suit of cups and coins. But I don't know how many or which ones. So we have the Ace of Cups, 2, 3. However, even if the entire suit of each were redrawn, and I don't know if that's true or not, it's flawless. I mean, I wouldn't know that they didn't belong. Okay, batons, ace. So for the suit of swords and batons, we have an animal. And these I think were intact, the suit of swords and batons. So let's look at the ace of cups again. Let's see. Oh, it's offered by a hand. So I don't know if that's the way it was or not. Now, I would have no reason to believe that Sullivan, and these look like they're labeled. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. I would have no, reason to suspect that Sullivan Hismans wouldn't have done anything without thoroughly researching and completely being confident that he was at least really close. Page. Now, I'll tell you, I had no idea what this card was. I presume it's the Knight of Batons. I put all the deck together and I put this one aside because I was like, I have no idea what this is. And I figured the odd, whatever suit didn't have a knight was the suit it belonged to. And it ended up being the suit of batons. I don't see the baton. I don't get what's going on in this particular card. That looks like an alligator almost, but I don't know. But it's an original, so. And then we have the Queen and the King. And now the suit of coin. And I don't know if it's being presented by a hand like the suit of cups was. I love the lyrical lining up of the 9. That's so whimsical. And we have female pages, I think, for both the cups and the coins, which is consistent with other decks. Okay, so here we have an example of a very early mass-produced tarot deck. If I can find my video on the comparison between the Budapest and the Rosenwald, I'll put it down below. I also encourage you guys always to read oh, look at that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever riffle shuffled this before. Well, I'm not doing such a good job, but I do have an apparatus in front of me. I do have a tripod in front of me, so I think it hinders, my ability to, but it does seem to riffle shuffle reasonably well. Cards are a little thick. But anything that Sullivan Hismans does, I'm gonna hand shuffle off. I'll finish this off camera. Anything that Sullivan Hismans does is you can expect it to be high quality. As far as the surface, the back has it has a sheen. You can see my overhead light. It's a very rainy day, and you can see it to some degree in the front too. Okay, I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to handle and mix the cards. I'm going to try to come up with some questions, at least one or two, and then I'll do a demonstration reading using this very cool early historic tarot deck. Okay, I have come up with a first question, and I went off camera and I had, meditated and handled a mix of cards, putting my head, in the place where I feel like I need to go, and I shuffle in an intent. That's a process unto itself, and I never do it on camera. It takes a few minutes. But when I do demonstration readings that aren't real, I put that as part of the intent. I explain so that we're all on the same page. in my own mind that I'm going to do a general reading. It may apply to some people. It may not apply to anybody, but it's intended as a demonstration, and it doesn't particularly focus on any particular individual. So it's a demonstration reading. And I think that's important to do because it gives a general, if you go in with a general intent, then you'll get a general intent on the way out, I think. And if you're doing it specifically for one person and the message they specifically have to hear, then you would be more specific in your intent. Anyway, I always do a few shuffles on camera to ensure that I'm not just doing a staged read where the cards were already predetermined or anything like that. Okay, oops. So my intent today as a demonstration reading is for any of us who are currently in the position of caring for someone at the end stage of life. Some of us may have already had that experience. Some of us may be in it at the moment. And it's a hard position to be in, but it's also a wonderful position to be in as a gift to be with someone at the end of their life, and what comfort and support you can bring them. And at any rate, I think I'm going to do this reading. I intended it to be three cards and maybe a fourth card, to see in what way we can assist the person in the most meaningful way. Okay, we have the Moon card as the first card. And then we have the Valet or the Page of Baton. He's pointing up. And 3 batons, okay. And this particular baton that's in the center is pointing down, although 2 are pointing up. Now, we don't have anything above or below it to show what they might all be pointing at. And in my intent, I only intended there to be 3 cards. So I can't utilize necessarily, unless it comes to me during the reading, how to utilize the arrow up, the finger pointing up, and any of these pointing up or down. I think I would like to do the 4th. So the way I do it, I stole this idea from the occultists. So I do pick and choose. I have in my career as a tarot person. I pick and choose what things I've found meaningful or helpful to do a tarot reading. And I've come up with my own style, right? Just like all of us do. We probably, I think if you're a serious reader, you make it your business to know as much about the cards and the history of the cards. But when all is said and done, the important thing is to have a direct relationship with the cards. And if they speak to you in a language you can hear, right? I think that's what makes for successful readings. My best readings, come as a result of just being intimately understanding of the cards. Okay, so let me add these up and I'll come back with the quintessential 4th card. For those of you who are familiar with my readings that I do, I do a lot of demonstration readings, whether they're real or for, practice. I'll lay a set number of cards and then I'll do the quintessential card for that row or for the read. Now, I just do the same thing that the occultist did. I have no reason to believe that it's not a good method. It works for me. It's worked for me for decades, whereby I add the numeric value of each of the cards. The only value I don't apply to any of the cards are the court cards, right? So we have, and I'm reading this deck, so I'm honoring the 17 of the Moon and the 3, get 20. And in this deck, 20 is Justice. Now, when I think of the quintessential card, I think of the quintessential card for a row or an entire read as being the essence or the gist of the moral or the lesson that we're supposed to get. So, okay, so justice, what does it, now we're going to read these specifically, but I kind of read these in order to understand how they get to here. So, and this is just my method of reading. I don't know how, how similar this was to the occultists. I just took their idea of taking, getting a quintessential card and using it. I'm not sure if they used it in the same way that I use it. So take what I say with a grain of salt. It's just how I do it. And if you like it, by all means, use it if it works for you. So when I think of justice, in the context of this question, what is the context of the question? The question was, how may a person who is assisting or being with someone or caring for someone who is at end of life, right? What could this card mean to that individual? Well, what do we have for justice? Justice is being fair, right? Justice is listening to both sides of a story, perhaps. So if the person wants to talk, listen. If the person has a story, or if the person wants to right a wrong, listen. Perhaps we can ask, what can I do? Is there any unfinished business that I can assist you with, as far as maybe giving somebody information or passing something along or correcting a wrong or correcting something that stands between you and another person or you and yourself? Or it doesn't even have to be a wrong, but is there anything that you'd like to be have taken care of fairly? It could also just mean listening to the person, listening to their stories, just allowing them to express themselves, being fair to that individual. Okay, so let's look at these other cards to see how we might get that message from these cards. And I just caught something. When I do readings, I don't concern myself with reversals. Now, if this did not have the word 3 written on it, I would have left it the way it appeared, right? But because I see that the intended way was this way, I don't believe that says any kind of word, but I think this could, perhaps in some old language mean 3. I don't know. I'm going to go with it meaning 3, the way it's written, and that this should go up. So now we have 2 figures where a point goes up. Now we had 2 going up here, but there was the prominent one was going down. But I'm thinking that this is probably the intended way to see these cards. And I usually just view cards the way they were intended. For example, if this had come out this way, I would have just done that when I laid the cards. Okay, I got that out of the way. The way it fell was this way. But the way I think it is intended to be viewed is this way. So you can decide which way you would view it or interpret it. And in the case that we have here, there's really nothing in the top row and there's really nothing on the bottom row for these arrows or these directions to affect, other than perhaps engaging in dialogue, right? The pages can represent a few things. Pages can represent news coming forward. Now we do have 2 cards from the suit of batons. So what do batons mean? It's irrelevant to me really if it's upside down or not. It's just that it's easier to see when it's upright. Well, for me, in the context of this question, batons suggest social, a social arena. Maybe reaching out to friends, right? Batons, let's think of batons, okay? Batons can mean work, it can mean play, it can mean activities, it can mean hobbies, it can mean passions that require a physical nature. For example, if someone is a master craftsman, right? Maybe they don't use, maybe they're not carpenters by trade, for example. Maybe they make their money, doing something else. But their passion is in creating in a physical way something, right? Or also look at athletes. Perhaps athletes, they're very physical, right? I think of batons as a physical suit. So it's a physical manifestation of perhaps a passion or occupation. And sometimes people are very passionate about their jobs. And so in that context, it can represent their field of work, right? So however, this might, if you are an individual who is caring for, or you are close to someone at end of life, what can you bring to them? You can think of whatever their social arena is, and you can think of, how may I help you in that regard? How could I help bringing some kind of closure? Is there anything I can do? Is there anything I can assist you with? I think that is a good way to understand these cards in relation to here. So I would look at their social arena, or if they have a business, how can I assist in making sure, the dust falls where it ought with your passion? Do you have a collection of something that you want to go to certain people? Just try to, I think, talk about the things that maybe we don't always think to talk about. And then after it's too late, it's like, dang, I wish I knew what that person wanted. And maybe they're not thinking of it. Maybe, so maybe we have to ask sometimes, what is it that you want me to do to straighten this out? Now, the Moon card being the first card in the spread, he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. And so, in a way, it kind of looks like the World card, except that it's not. So there's things that are unknowable, right? There's some things, that we may never understand or never know. And it's sad. He's not jumping up and down. Let me pull the Sun card so you can see the difference in disposition between these two cards. Well, truth be told, the Sun's expression isn't that much more exciting than the Moon's expression, but we get a much more joyous feel, right? We have a bright sky, sunny sky, things are growing. Here, likewise, we have things growing, but we also have an individual who looks burdened, right? And so to recognize in the context of the question asked, sometimes it's something we'd rather not deal with, right? It's a moody thing. It's a sad thing. It's, when you're with someone and they're dying, maybe you don't want to even mention that they're dying, right? There's so many unanswered truths, right, that aren't obvious like they would be in daylight, right? There's unanswered stories. And I think that's how we get to the Justice card, of helping that individual feel complete. Help the individual feel complete. Now, I don't see the World card. That might, if we had the World card here, that would be, help them feel, help them get to the end point or the end game or the destination. But there's still time here. They're not dead yet, right? So in the time that is left, help them rest their mind at ease. They're going into this end of life with a heavy burden too, right? They probably know, right? So there's There's a sadness, a melancholia, which is an interpretation we can have for the cards. And sending a message along. 3 is an unstable number. It's an active number, so it requires active engagement and participating. It's not just, it's not just talking to the person, but maybe implementing a message. I have a message for someone. Please implement it for me. Get it to that individual. And in general, a fairness, and listen to the individual stories. Without being a specific individual, I wouldn't know how to more. Let me flip the camera. What I was trying to express before I flip the camera is, if I were doing this specifically for myself, if there was someone that I was assisting at end of life and I was reading this, I might understand it more specifically than how I've generally just done it, right? I'm giving a very general reading. And the idea is to, when you're doing a reading, is to interpret the cards for the situation. Now, when you're close to a situation, you know all the ins and outs. When you're not involved in a situation and you're helping someone, and I think it's a mistake, and I always have, and since the beginning, of my tarot career, it's a mistake to look at interpretation of cards for fortune telling. I mean, there are times when there's an uncanny development whereby what you interpret the cards is what happens. Sometimes it just happens that way. And when it happens that way, it looks like fortune telling. But really what it is to give us all ideas about how a situation can go and to be prepared for situations that we might not have considered. And in the case of a person who's at the end of life and we're witness to it, what can we do to bring meaning and help assist that person in some way? Now, for some of you, if it's happening, the person might be in law, right? They could be a law enforcement, an individual in law enforcement, or they can be an attorney. So the judgment card, right, could mean something completely different in the context of how it relates to you. But in a general way, for me, interpreting the cards just now, I would interpret it as being fair and listening. And then with the cards of batons in a general way, and I think they appeared this way. The 3 of batons came first, and the valet came first, and then the 3 of batons, either direction, it doesn't really matter. To deliver some kind of message to a social arena, right? Maybe deliver a message, help not justify maybe, but help rectify or help bring fairness to something, ask. And then the first card just being the card of sadness. Maybe acknowledge that they're sad. Acknowledge that you're sad, right? It's a big thing not to notice. And not that you want to be sad and act all gloomy, because being with someone at the end is a blessing for both of you, right? But when we skirt around it and we act like it's not happening, then we fail to get the information we need from them to help them go in peace. We want them to pass on in peace, right? I think that's probably what we really would love to do, is help the person pass on in peace and have peace. And so we wouldn't ignore it, even as heavy as our hearts are, acknowledge it and ask what I can do. Well, that's how I would interpret these cards. I hope they've been helpful to you. I would have done another reading, but this is already 45 minutes. So I guess it's already too long. I hope you've watched to the end. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well. And thank you for the idea. And Sigalius, and always, if you have an idea and I have the cards, I'll do it. Until next time, peace, stay well.